Now let's look at even though. So let's first describe what even though is and what we're doing when we use even though. So even though shows two opposite ideas, two ideas that don't match. So let's look at this sentence here. So it says even though, and it says I am really tired. So what do you normally do when you're really tired? When you're really tired, you go to bed, you relax, you stay home, you take it easy. But because we're using even though, we have to do something that is the total opposite. We have to do something that doesn't match. So it says, even though I am really tired, I will stay back late today. So this is the complete opposite to what you do when you're really tired. Okay, let's look at the next one. Even though I find it really difficult, so remember when you say I find it, that means that you think it is really difficult. So what do you normally do when you find it really difficult? When you're doing something and it's really difficult, normally you stop, you try to do something else, and you don't want to do it. That's what you normally do when something's really, really too difficult. You go really slow, or you stop, or you don't want to try. So we're going to have to do the opposite. Even though I find it really difficult, I am going to continue. So we have done the opposite. So that's what we're doing when we're using even though. We're using two clauses, two parts of the sentence that are opposite. Now these are some other words for even though. And these 5 at the top, they start the sentence. So that's why I've put a capital letter. These 5 at the top start a sentence, whereas this one down here goes in the middle. So these are more sophisticated words for even though. Now let's look at these 3 here. Although, despite the fact that, in spite of the fact that. These start the sentence and there's a comma in the middle of a sentence. So it says there, although I came late, now we have to do the opposite, I finished it quickly. So normally when you come late, you're behind, you can't finish it, but we're going to do the opposite. And we put the comma in the middle there. Despite the fact that I have worked here for a long time, I still make a lot of mistakes. Okay, so usually if you work somewhere for a long time, you should know the job very well, but we're going to do the opposite because of despite the fact that. And last one, in spite of the fact that I studied all night, I didn't do well. Okay, so they are opposites. Now we've got despite and in spite of. And we have to do despite plus verb ing, in spite of verb ing. And again, it starts the sentence and there's a comma in the middle. So despite and then verb ing, despite learning the program for many hours, I still don't understand. So normally, if you learn for many hours, you should understand. Now, if you note here, there's no subject. It's just despite learning. Okay, and now the next one. In spite of not understanding, she completed the work well. Again, there's no subject here, but if you want to use not, you put the not in front of the verb ing. Okay, and again, we've seen this before. Normally you don't have the subject, but if you do want to include the subject, you have to use the object pronoun. So despite me learning the program for many hours, I still don't understand. In spite of her not understanding, she completed the work well. But remember, this is more for when you're talking. You probably don't want to do this when you're writing. And last one is here. It's pronounced albeit. Albeit. And it usually goes in the middle of a sentence. And it's usually just when we want to mention a small contradiction. So we're doing the opposite, but it's just small. So usually it's just like a noun. So for example, I have the worst headache, albeit only for a short time. So we don't actually have a verb here. It's just a small thing that's showing a little bit of that it's opposite. So usually the worst headache, but it's only a short time. I have to complete this work, albeit an unimportant job. So again, there's no verb. It's just a small little comment on how it's the opposite.